This is the Vision 79 podcast where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sander's is 40, mine is 39, and we have a shared vision of success in business and personal life. If you're new to the podcast, welcome in, and if you're a returning listener, welcome back. In either case, we hope you're able to take away something constructive from this. We have a long road ahead of us, and we still have lots to learn. Many successful people started from the ground up, but very few of them documented their process. We intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish.
Very cool. I love it.
Speaking of finish, I saw a video the other day of someone in a cemetery who found a QR code etched into their tombstone.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that before. And it plays a song?
Yeah, it plays a song, and it plays like a little video of like, you know, their last couple of years with their loved one or like their first dance, and then it's mirrored with their last dance or something sweet. And
what would your song be?
I would just make the QR code Rickroll someone, which is what I was fully expecting when I saw it come up. Oh, yeah. I was like, oh, they're going to Rickroll me. And then it was like very sweet, emotional shit. And I was like, oh, man, who am I? I'm nowhere ready. I'm nowhere ready for death yet. So, okay, do you have any opening remarks? I've got a couple of things to just lead us in and recap the week, but do you have anything written down or just the quotes or questions?
I think it would be good to recap this week. I think it was a good productive week. So let's hit those.
Yeah.
And then if I got anything to add, I got something to add. So.
First note I have is I got my Whoop back, which is fantastic. Sure. I had been worried about my heart rate being horrific. In college, while I was rowing, I had a resting heart rate of 42 beats per minute awake, and a resting heart rate of 36 beats per minute is the lowest I got sleeping. And recently I felt really out of shape, and so I decided to get the Whoop because I've not been sleeping well, and I want to sleep better and get my heart rate better. I got the Whoop. It turns out my resting heart rate now is in the low 50s, so I'm not actually that far off. So I'm going to start doing some fucking nutty cardio to try and get it back down to the low 40s. But I'm super happy I've got it. I've been tracking my sleep with it. And we could talk more about that in a bit, but I got to burn through the rest of these notes. Still waiting to sign our NDA, but there's been a big development recently, so the ball is officially rolling. We spent this last week to get back in the groove, getting back into the swing of things. I moved a couple weeks ago. We missed a couple podcasts. We kind of fell out of the work groove. Progress wasn't being made, not of our own accord, but we had to wait for people. So we spent the last week getting back in the swing of things. We made a plan. We executed on the plan. I think it's going pretty well, especially after the work we got done last night.
Yeah. Last time was super productive.
Yeah. And the last note that I have is that I was wrong about the TikToks for this channel because initially when we started, I told you. So the reason I bring this up is it's important to me to admit when you're wrong about things. And I don't want to just say it's important to admit when you're wrong about things and never actually do it. So I'm making a note to do it right now. When we started, I said, I don't give a fuck about any promotional content. I just want to do the podcast because it's for us, right? I like that perspective still. And that's still what I attest to. If we have to drop the TikToks and the Instagram posts and whatever, because all we have time for is the podcast, that's perfectly fine with me.
Well, I think it's also important because if we get too far into the deep end on promotion and social media, we're going to start reading the comments and then catering the podcast to what other people think. Right. And I think that defeats the purpose of us doing a podcast to see how we grow as people.
Right.
You know, and how we expand.
Right. But conflicting with my statement, I can not care about it all I want. But at the end of the day, we are making the podcast for ourselves in the future and other people. And other people aren't going to know about it unless we reach out to them somehow. No one stumbles upon new podcasts on Spotify, not sane people, right? And the best way to reach out, it seems at the moment, is to get a cult following on TikTok. So recently I made a comment that we could probably improve the quality of the TikToks. And you called me out for saying you didn't fucking care about it a week ago. And you're totally right. I didn't. And I changed my perspective on it. I think I was wrong.
Yeah, I think it's a good point of outreach. I liked your idea of essentially having TikToks every week for the podcast, but having a 1 week delay. So you have a 2 week chunk of time to get everything uploaded into the editor that we're using and then to actually edit it. Because this week we ran into some hurdles with last week's podcast being on the longer side. It was we had to break it up into 2 parts and then re-export it. And there was some audio issues and stuff like that.
I did everything I could to make it as short as possible. I deleted half the audio file on accident.
Yeah, I could have just been like, oh, well, I guess we have to have a podcast and then like made my life way easier in that respect. But yeah, I think it's worth having the full thing out there. It's a little bit longer, but it's good.
Yeah, I agree. It's
I
so
think
funny.
the TikToks are important. I think we can manage it well with having a 2-week delay on them, but having TikToks every week, at least in the coming weeks. We might not have to do that, but it's an idea, and it might make our lives a little bit easier. And I think the social media outreach has been really good this week. We've been doing Kahuna posts every week, the Vision 79 posts. Every day. Kahuna posts every day. Vision 79 posts every day. TikTok's coming out every day. So I think there's a lot of good on that front. And we're hitting all different platforms between Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. So
yeah, I've been forgetting to post on Twitter, but I'm going to try and make a point of that to do it more frequently.
Yeah, the Vision 79, the Facebook and Insta posts get copied over to Twitter. So that's been...
Oh, really? So it has been posting.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I had no idea.
Yeah,
it's so funny to me that
it's the same stuff as Facebook and Instagram, but it's a copy paste of Facebook and Instagram. So it's
right. It reposts it to
it gets posted all at the same time, and then the TikTok gets posted at the same time as well, in accordance to whatever the post is.
Interesting. Okay, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There you go.
So it's all synced up.
It's funny to me that we're making an effort to make the podcast shorter, and this is a 2-page notes sheet that I have.
I actually did make an effort. Despite the length of my notes, I only have 3 things.
Yeah, I've got 2 pages. So with that, we should get into the meat of it. You have quotes or questions this week, and do you want to start?
I got
with them
2 paraphrased quotes, and I have 1 question.
That paragraph is a paraphrase?
These are paraphrased quotes with questions attached to them.
Okay.
So it's shorter but longer.
All right. What do you want to start with? Or do you want me to start?
I'll hit it off. So in Rich Dad Poor Dad, I backtracked a little bit to OG times when we were first getting into this and read Rich Dad Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. And one thing that's mentioned in the book is, what I know makes me money, what I don't know loses me money. But every time I'm arrogant, I lose money because arrogance disguises what I don't know. And so my question tied to this is, how do you differentiate arrogance between ego and confidence and competence? And how do you walk the line between those?
Read the first sentence back again.
What I know makes me money. Yep. What I don't know loses me money.
Okay, got it.
And every time I'm arrogant, I lose money.
Okay, got it.
Because arrogance disguises what I don't know.
Got it. Okay, I can answer this pretty clearly. Arrogance, ego, and confidence and competence.
Yeah.
The difference, I like to simplify it a little bit because those are 4 factors I like to simplify.
They're complex, so if you can simplify them.
I've got a really great way to lay it flat, and it's because going into engineering in college, I met this absolute total fucking douchebag through my girlfriend at the time. He was her older sister's friend, and he was a real prick. And she was like, yeah, he's in electrical engineering. And I was like, I know. He said it 7 times. And he tried to make me feel bad that I wasn't, or that I was a fucking freshman in college and he was a graduate student. Like, dick, right? Yeah. And I started to recognize a trend, which is most engineers have that unstoppable ego and let you know about it. And most people know that engineers have that unstoppable ego. And I didn't want to be that kind of engineer. So I tried to take my confidence and cockiness from rowing and attribute the lessons I had learned from that into engineering. And the core difference, what I boiled it down to over all this thought, is the difference between cockiness and confidence is whether or not you execute. That's it. All your actions leading up to it are pretty much the same, right? If you shit talk, like Michael Jordan was one of the greatest shit talkers in all of sport, right? And everyone reveres him for that because then he went out and dominated, right? Likewise, you could say, well, it's more respectful to not and still dominate. But really, at the end of the day, they're both winning, right? If Michael Jordan went out on the court, shit talked, and then got his ass handed to him, it would be cocky. But he went out, shit talked, and crushed it, so it's confident.
How do you differentiate between arrogance and ego? Or do you differentiate between the two?
I think that they're pretty similar. Arrogance, I find to be more dismissive than ego. With ego, it's like, I know what I'm talking about, and I'll tell you why I know what I'm talking about. And arrogance is more of
I'll know what I'm talking about, and I don't have to tell you what I'm talking about because you're less than me.
Yeah, it's dismissive. It's like, I don't have to explain it to you. And that's really easy for people to do because they think that they're taking the high road by saying, I'm not even going to bother telling it to you, right? But in actuality, one of the best ways to learn is to teach.
Sure.
And if you're unwilling to talk to somebody, if you're unwilling to talk to somebody through a topic like that, then what are you doing, right? You're not helping either of you. So that's how I differentiate between the two.
Yeah, I was curious. I was looking back through my Rich Dad Poor Dad notes, and I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting quote. So
yeah,
threw it on there.
It's tough, and not many people do it well. A lot of people get really stuck in it, especially once they start to see success, or ironically, if they never see success. Because people who don't see success that they wish they had double down on the fact that they're awesome and they're better than you, and they don't have to explain themselves to you. And that's one of the reasons that they're not as successful as they want to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For me, it's a working definition. I don't know where I sit yet in the question, which is part of the reason I asked. I was curious.
Yeah.
But I think that at least a differentiation between confidence and ego/arrogance, in my eyes, confidence has more of a, I know what I'm doing, I know where I stand, but has more open ears to the other perspective, versus ego and arrogance has that confidence per se of I know where I sit, I know where I stand, but it doesn't necessarily have as open ears to other interpretations.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a perfect definition. That's how I, right now, my working definition. But I was curious of what you had too.
Yeah. I think they're pretty similar.
Yeah.
Line.
Yeah. Do you
I've got a bunch of quotes today. And I did something last week where I wrote down just as many as I found that week, and then I picked through my favorite ones during the podcast. So I'm going to do something similar today.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that one of my favorites that I want to spend some time on is people who help others with zero expectation experience higher levels of fulfillment, live longer, and make more money. And I thought this one was interesting because it's wholesome, it's self-gratifying, it helps other people, it's charitable, and I disagree with it half the time.
Yeah, I think there's a line between helping people without expectation. Like, for example, let me tie it to something. If someone calls me up from Alhana, they're like, hey, Senator, I know we don't know each other very well, but I'm having this issue with my car. Can you come to my house this Sunday and help me out, right? I can go over and help them out, but if I'm going to spend 3-4 hours of my time where I could be doing something else, I expect something in return. Like, either they bring me a tea as a thank you, or pay me monetarily, or, have something to return. Like maybe, I have a friend who does video editing. He can help you guys out with the editing for the podcast, whatever, right? So, I think it's important to give and then wait to receive, right? Rich Dad Poor Dad talks about that too, where it's like give first and then receive, whereas most people ask to receive and then once they receive, they'll give. He talks about it with money specifically, right? Like, when I get money, I'll give back, versus like, I'm going to give money and invest and wait for the returns to come to me, right? Yeah. So I think there's a line between, there's a line between what's worth your time and what's not worth your time. What I like about that quote is that it ties back to the idea that you should work without looking at the clock, right? It ties back to the idea of I'm going to work on something because I'm passionate about it, and I don't know if this business will have return for me, and I don't know if this business will have success for me, and I don't know where it will go, but I'm passionate about it. I think I'll learn something. I'm interested in it, and I'm going to go for it. I like that aspect of the quote. I see it tying into that concept. But I think there is a side to it that's, you can't just go about your day wasting your time to spend it on other things that don't really matter, or you don't see any growth potential from it, right? Like me going to fix a car, I might stumble in on a situation where they can help me and I don't know it, but if I'm there for, let's say I have a cap on the time I'll spend. If I'm there for more than an hour, I'm like, hey, I gotta go. You know what I mean? Because after an hour, you might be able to understand what you're going to get from that interaction, right? And it's not to say that like I expect something out of someone every time I help them, right? But at the same time, my time is valuable, and just like I'm not going to waste their time, I expect them not to waste my time. Yeah. So I think there's a line in there. How do you feel about it?
I think a lot of people spend too much time helping others. I think there's such thing as too much of a good thing.
Who said the quote? Do you remember?
Hormozy.
Yeah, that's interesting. It sounded like Hormozy, but Hormozy also talks about not wasting time doing stuff that isn't for yourself. Like he talks a lot about
Right.
prioritizing yourself and
Yeah.
what you're working on. So it's interesting to come from him, you know, two sides.
Yeah. It's two sides of the same coin, and they're core values. They're good values, right? It's help other people and you'll be happier,
right?
And they'll be happier. It's a good thing to do, is to help other people. And I thought it was interesting because if you listen to a lot of Hormozi's stuff, you'll understand what he means by this, which is be charitable and be giving and be a good neighbor, right? Mm-hmm. But if you really listen to his stuff, he has that other side of prioritize yourself.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because if you isolate this quote, it looks like, you know, don't be selfish, don't work for yourself, don't have your own priorities, right? But instead of putting this quote on a pedestal and trying to be the perfect neighbor and to help people first, right? This is a really great tool for me to ground myself if I get too egotistical and prioritize myself too much. It's good to use this as a reminder to take breaks and help people sometimes, right? So, you know, a great example. Yeah, a great example was this morning I went to the bar and it was dead empty. It was Easter, right? No one was there. I'm serious. Empty parking lot. I was the only person in the bar apart from the bartender. And so I was just going to get a drink to go, but I got the drink to go, and then I wound up hanging out for an extra 10 minutes to keep them company. And then I texted Grace, and I was like, you should head to the bar. It's dead empty. They could use some company. And I think that they appreciated that. It wasn't expected, and it came out of nowhere, and it didn't take a bunch of my time, but I had a busy day today, right? But instead of, in my own head, making today all about me and getting my shit done and whatever, I took a little effort to, you know, maybe make that person stay better. Yeah.
100%.
And it's not help in the sense of like, I'm having a problem. Can you help me solve it? It was help in the sense of like, I can tell it's kind of lonely in here and I want to make your day a little better.
Yep.
And I like that quote can keep me anchored sometimes.
Yeah. I like that. Mm-hmm. I enjoy that. I guess this is kind of similar.
It's allowed to be totally different. That's okay. We can switch topics.
This is different. This is different for sure. It could be tied in, but I'll go for it. So Rich Dad Poor Dad again. Don't dip into your savings or investments when you come up short. Let the pressure build to inspire financial genius to come up with making more money and then pay your bills. This will increase your ability to make more money and financial intelligence. The bookkeepers will scream, defend your asset fort. Don't dip into your savings. The rich know that those are for building assets and not paying bills. So essentially the idea is your investments are your investments. Mm-hmm. Don't backtrack on that investment to pay bills or stuff on your life. Let the pressure build by having those things be investments and having low net cash in your savings, and then figure out how to make more money to pay your bills.
Yeah.
Pay your bills later. Let that pressure drive your inspiration or your drive to get those bills paid.
Yeah.
And then the question tied to this that I had is, do you practice this in your business pursuits, so your day-to-day, and how do you think this mentality works for you?
It's super situational for me, I think, because the majority of people don't have investments. Not true investments, right? Like they'll put money in the stock market, and to me, that's not an investment, right? To me, that's just, you know, a good place to put your money so that it grows with inflation, and that's it, right? Yeah. It's a safe place to put your dollar. It's not an investment. Mm-hmm. Your money isn't going out and making more money for you. And so when people are struggling with credit card debt, right? If a new college grad is in credit card debt, they just moved, they spent a bunch of money, and they're, you know, $3,000 down in credit. I don't want them to think to themselves, oh, well, you know, I'm going to go pick up a second job to pay off this credit card debt. If you have $15,000 in your S&P 500 money market account, just pull the money out. That's not an investment. It's not savings. It's not whatever. Now, if you're struggling to pay bills and you have an investment such as a business or real estate, hard assets, it's situational because it depends. Why are you missing the money in the first place? You shouldn't be investing if you can't make your bills, right? If you can't make it paycheck to paycheck from the job that you have, you need to increase your income somehow. And if that's from another job or from building a business with other people's money, that's fine, but you need to be able to pay your own bills. So if I weren't able to make my bills and I were slipping into credit card debt, my answer wouldn't be, I'm going to buy a rental property. That's what I'm going to do. And then I'll put a tenant in it, and then they're going to pay the mortgage for me, and they're going to pay $200 a month. Then I'm going to make $200 a month, because I know I don't have the money to put down on that property. I can't make those PMI payments. The tenant's not going to cover it for me, and I won't be green on that. And I'm leveraging against myself. I'll have to use other people's money to buy the house, the bank or private lender, right? And it's problematic. So I think that quote is meant for people who are successful and are in a tough spot. And it's meant to motivate them to say, hey, don't give up on what you're doing, right? Push, don't pivot. And Hormozi talks a lot about when to decide to push or pivot. And he has a really great definition, which is, if you think you've done all you can do and it's still not working, pivot. Mm-hmm. If you think you've genuinely given 100% and there's nothing more you can do and it's still not working, pivot. But if there's still more you think you can do, then push. And sometimes it's important to pivot. It's important to know when to pivot.
Yeah.
So I think that quote is situational, probably highly motivational for people who are in a position to push, but super misinformative to somebody who needs to pivot.
Yeah, I hear that. I do like the idea, though. I like the idea of putting yourself in a situation where you have to make it work. You know, burning your boats, mm-hmm. lighting that fire.
Yeah.
I think that's an important, that's something important that you should carry in your back pocket when you're going into business situations. You know, not necessarily always. I think it's important to have rationale into the situation. It's important to have a clear head. It's not, valuable to just burn your boats to burn your boats, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're having a business established and you're looking at growth and you're going to quit your 9 to 5,
mm-hmm.
and you're going to save up to quit your 9 to 5, I think that process of being unemployed and working on your business is a valuable tool to light the fire under you to really start pushing.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think it puts the pressure on for you to really grow that business in the next couple months or few months to be able to pay your bills again without using savings.
Right.
So I think it has value to it for sure.
Yeah.
But I see the side of it where it can lead some people astray. If they don't have a system in place or they don't have the confidence in themselves and they're just going to throw something at the wall and hope,
mm-hmm.
right? And, that's just going to lead to them breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
And although that might be a valuable learning experience and they might get a lot out of losing, and not succeeding in whatever they're going for, or
mm-hmm.
maybe they will succeed, but let's say they don't, it puts you in a really tough spot that I think has high potential to completely break you down, right? So I think you need to be in the right frame of mind to use this idea.
Right.
You can't be in a low panic spot where you're just throwing stuff against the wall and burning your boats. You got to be going into it with a clear mind and a vision. And then you can start to, really hone in on your assets and your business building.
Mm-hmm.
And if your bills are to the sides, you can really hone in on that business and then pay the bills, right? Yeah. But if you're paying your bills and you're just going to throw something at the wall and going to hope that the business, goes through, that's not the way to approach it, in my opinion.
Yeah. It depends on how people handle stress.
Mm-hmm.
Because if someone works more efficiently when they're not under stress, avoid it. I mean, that makes the most sense to me, right?
Sure.
But some people work better under stress. And if that's the case, apply a little pressure, right?
Right.
And some people do great things under immense pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm the type of person to put my fortune on black. Like
mm-hmm.
I think that the crucible and that high intense pressure making the transition from 9 to 5 to business owner is important because you have to make it work. And if it doesn't, you've got to go back to the 9 to 5. No one wants to go there. That's hell. Right. But once you have several streams of income, once you have a very successful business making you a lot of money, I don't think that there's a huge need to apply that huge amount of pressure and put all of your cards on black, or I'm sorry, all of your chips on black.
Yeah.
At that point, you've built up enough resources that you can pivot in any direction that you want to go. Yeah. So I think that pressure and motivation is important at first, but if someone,
I think it keeps the fire lit, though. I mean, because if you like, we know someone who has become very successful, but they don't necessarily have the same fire wit anymore because they're comfortable in their business now.
Right.
And so I think that, you know, to them, that might be what they want to do. They might be happy there, right? And they're happy living off of the income that they have now and just riding that out for the rest of their lives because it's freeing, right? But at the same time, I think if you're the type of person who wants more and more and more and more, you have to keep that fire lit with some of this mentality, I think. And you could disagree too.
I think that the difference there is the person we know isn't motivated anymore. They don't care. Sure. They don't want more and more and more. If you asked them 15 years ago, what's your goal? They'll say, I want to be a millionaire, or I don't want to work anymore. But we don't have those goals. We have the billionaire goal. Right. And that is a non-stop journey. So I don't feel that I need that immense pressure to keep me working because I'm going to be working toward. It's the same conversation we had in the last podcast about dedication and motivation, right? Having that intense pressure where it has to work is motivation. It's short term. That's not long term. You can't feel that way every day. You'll stress yourself out and die at 30.
True.
But if you know deep down, regardless of how stressful the situation is and regardless of how bad I need this money, I know where I'm going. It doesn't matter, right? I think that for a person who is quitting their 9-to-5, it's important to realize the gravity of the situation, which is you're entering another world. It's different. You can't not work, and you can't just take time off whenever. That's not how it works. Because if you don't work, you don't make money, and that's a bad thing. Until you have a business, which produces money when you're not around. Yeah. The ultimate goal.
Right.
So I think that's valuable as a reality check, but it's, for me at least, it's not a place where I want to be
100% of the time.
Yeah.
I get that. I hear it.
Because once you reach a certain level of success, there's no need to take on that much risk, right?
Yeah.
There's no need to burn your boats. Right. Now, you can view something as, Hormozi talks about this too. If we have a $5 million business and we decide to sell it, to take that money and go into a different endeavor, he says you need to have that next endeavor locked in and figured out before you sell. Otherwise, you're going to sell, have all this money, not know what to do with it, and do something wrong. Yeah. So you need to have the next thing. And the guy we know doesn't have a next thing. He's just happy where he is. So why sell? Because there's no point. But you and I are always going to be looking for the next thing, regardless of whether or not something has to work. And however many boats we have or have it burned, we're always going to be looking for the next thing. And so as for right now, I don't feel I need that, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. I just wanted to ask you and bring it up. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
So, cool. I have one more question I do want to ask to kind of close out.
Yeah.
Do you have one more quote for us?
Yeah. Hormozi talked about how he starts to identify adjectives as functions of actions that people have, or emotion as a function of actions, right? So one of them was depression is similar to ignorance in that you just don't know anything, and that's solvable. If you learn the answer to the question you have, you're not sad anymore. Anxiety is too many options. And so if you can narrow your options down, you're not anxious anymore.
Or Bezos has a really good take on anxiety too. He says that anxiety is the product of knowing you have something to do, but not doing it. And if you do that thing and you solve it, you will no longer be anxious.
Exactly. It's taking those feelings and then breaking it down into actions. And one of them that he had was scarcity is a function of quantity. Urgency is a function of time. This is where you only limit when people can sign up rather than how many. And I thought that was interesting because essentially what he's saying is one way to get customers, you don't have to have low supply to increase the demand. You can just limit the amount of time in which they can do it.
Yeah.
So run specials for some amount of time. Yeah, for example, the storage unit that I got, great deal, right? But I know it's going to close in the next 2 months. I know their prices are going to go up. So they say, hey, you can lock in this price for the next year if you pay it all right now. I have the money. That's exactly what I'm going to do because I know the price is going to triple.
Right.
But I thought that was an interesting quote. I really like how he takes those emotions and then quantifies them into actionable items. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. No, I love his stuff. I think he's a very valuable person to listen to.
What's your question?
The closing question I have is, what advice do you have for people who are wantrepreneurs now? And to define wantrepreneurs for the audience is, it's essentially someone that wants to be an entrepreneur, They talk about entrepreneurial things. They talk about building businesses. They talk about getting a multiple income streams, but they don't actually do physical actions to go after those things. So for, a variety of reasons. Maybe they don't feel like they're in the right place and time right now. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they don't have someone to talk to. Maybe they don't feel like they have friends that can listen to them about their business pursuits, whatever. But the point being is that what advice do you have for people who are wantrepreneurs now to become entrepreneurs?
If you don't take action, it'll never happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like a wantrepreneur is one of the worst insults, I think. Because it essentially means that you talk a big talk, but don't actually execute on anything. We all met the kid in high school, right? Who fits this bill exactly, who talks a big game and then doesn't follow through on it, right? And I have no advice for those people because the advice is really simple, which is if you don't take action, nothing will happen.
Yeah.
So if I were to try and help them, which isn't exactly my prerogative because I don't like people who talk a lot and can't back it up, it would be execute. Now, on the very slim few who do want to be an entrepreneur but don't know how to do it, the advice that I give would be to learn as much as possible by your own accord and from others.
Yeah.
And know what is good advice and what is bad advice. So that comes from self-educating. You need to self-educate yourself enough through experience or reading or talking to know when someone's dishing out bullshit to you, because then you're going to start to see all the other wantrepreneurs for what they really are, which is just people who want but don't get.
Yeah. I think my advice would be to start somewhere, regardless of how you feel. If you feel anxious because you don't know where the road you're potentially going down weeds. If you feel like you don't have people to support you, if you don't have friends to talk to about being an entrepreneur, if you don't have podcasts that you listen to right now that feel inspiring to you, seek out those things. Put something on a sheet that you want to do that day and just seek it out. And even if you don't get there, even if you feel like you're not making progress, in reality, you are making progress because you started somewhere and you, regardless of where you get, you know more now. And that's progress, For example, with the Camaro work that we did, right? It still has the same water leak issue, right? But we went through the process of taking out the heater core, looking at it, looking at the evaporator drain and casing to see if that was the issue, right? And you could say, okay, we made no progress on the leak. But in reality, we are more informed now than we were before that job. So don't get stuck not knowing where to go, because no one really knows where to go when they start. They just start somewhere and they start learning, and then an idea and then a path develops from there. It's just important to pick something, right? And even if it's small, even if it's 30 minutes a day that you listen to a podcast, or you listen to your podcast on the way to work, or you pick up a book like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or you call up a real estate agency and you're like, hey, I want to intern or something like that. Anything like that, if you can start yourself on some path, I think that that's valuable. And that's the first step to becoming an entrepreneur versus a wantrepreneur. But that's what I have.
It's taking action.
It's taking action. It ultimately comes down to just taking action, like you said.
And with the Camaro, similar to a lot of the stuff that Hormozy says, is you can be stuck in the same situation as you were before. Camaro still leaks, period. But you're in the same situation, but you're a different person because your knowledge has changed. You know more now. And that's what's most important, is how much you know.
Yeah.
Because you always have the opportunity to take action, always. And if you don't know anything and don't take action, you're a wantrepreneur. If you know something and don't take action, you're a wantrepreneur. If you don't know anything and take action, you're an entrepreneur. And if you know something and you take action, you're an entrepreneur. The only difference in those 4 scenarios is what you do with it. What you do with what you have.
100% agree.
All right.
Cool. That was a good little podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in. And stay tuned next week for another one.